Well, welcome. It's my great privilege to welcome all of you to this very special occasion. We're very pleased to welcome Provost Michael Bernstein and students and faculty, and very specially Professor Paul Barron and his wife Arlene and other members of their family, and many other special guests I'm very happy to see here today. An investiture into a named professorship is a very important milestone, not only for the faculty member who is honored by the appointment, but also in the life of the academic institution. All academic institutions define themselves first and foremost by their faculty, and through these appointments to endowed professorships and chairs, we recognize the very best of what we are as an institution. It's also a celebration of the impact that philanthropy can have in the life of an institution and in advancing our mission. And so I want to take the early opportunity now to thank the Barron family and the many friends and admirers of Paul and Abram Barron for creating this professorship. In investing Gabe Feldman into the Paul and Abram B. professorship, we recognize an exceptional scholar, a teacher, and academic leader. In the very best Tulane tradition, Professor Feldman has excelled on all fronts. His scholarship, exploring the interrelation between antitrust, labor law, intellectual property law, and other fields in the context of professional and intercollegiate sports, is nuanced and reflects not only the insights of a careful scholar, but also one who has practiced at the very highest levels of the field for years before entering academia, and also one who remains deeply immersed in the industry he studies. Besides his publications in leading law reviews, Professor Feldman is also the editor of the Sports Law Journal and the Sports Lawyer. He is widely recognized as one of the country's top experts in the field, and his analysis is much in demand from every venue, from the most elite academic conferences in the country to the nation's leading newspapers and the NFL Network. Professor Feldman is also a superlative teacher, recognized not only for his excellence in the classroom, but also for his dedication to mentoring students and working to create opportunities for them to get a foothold in the intensely competitive world of sports law. In 2013, he was recognized with the President's Award for Graduate and Professional Teaching, the campus's highest teaching honor. Finally, Professor Feldman is also a remarkable academic leader. As the director of Tulane's renowned sports law program, he has expanded the impact and visibility of that program and ensured that it remains the country's finest. Somehow, he manages to do all of this while also serving as Associate Provost for NCAA compliance and serving in leadership roles in several important organizations, including Athletes for Hope, and recently newly appointed as Director of Special Olympics in New Orleans. We are extremely fortunate to count him as a colleague and leader in our community. Today's investiture, however, is also an opportunity to honor another colleague, for it marks the inaugural appointment to a new professorship honoring Paul Barron and his father, Abram. Professor Barron and Professor Feldman are very much cut from the same cloth. A member of our faculty since 1977, Professor Barron is a favorite teacher to generations of Tulane alumni, and I can attest to that from my running into them at many occasions, and as they ask after Paul, who twice won the Felix Frankfurter Distinguished Teaching Award, the law school's highest teaching honor. He is also a respected scholar who's left his mark in fields from labor law and commercial law and alternative dispute resolution. And like Professor Feldman, he has always been a leader on our faculty and on our campus. Through the years, Professor Barron has led the law school as vice dean, as the chair of virtually every significant committee, and has been tapped by the university to lead as interim provost twice and as chief information officer. He has always commanded the respect and the affection of his colleagues because of his rare combination of shrewd practical judgment ambition, innovation, and importantly, deeply admirable compassion. So today, as we celebrate Professor Feldman, we also honor and express our profound gratitude and appreciation to Paul and to his father Abram for nearly 4 decades of leadership and accomplishment. With that, it's my honor to invite Professor and Provost Michael Bernstein to the podium.
Thank you, Dave, and good afternoon, everybody. This is a wonderful occasion, and I am delighted and honored to be a part of it and to celebrate 2 very special colleagues, Gabe Feldman and, of course, Paul Barron, in the same afternoon. It's a really good day. I have a couple of very happy tasks to perform here. One is to talk briefly about the significance of appointment to these named positions, in this case, a named professorship here in our law school. The other is to, in a moment, I will invite Paul Barron up to the podium, and I will read a resolution that has been passed in his honor by the university trustees. A lot of whereases there. We'll talk about that later. And then I know that Paul has some remarks to share, and then we will invest Gabe, and we'll be hearing from Gabe. So all very happy tasks. Let me start by sharing a few observations about these positions. I talk with my colleagues often about this. In the academic world, to be appointed to a named position is a singular acknowledgement of one's standing and accomplishment as a scholar, as a teacher, as a colleague, as a mentor. And in that respect, for any colleague who has that honor, it's really a very special moment in a career to take up a named position. Yes, the position represents not simply distinction, it represents resources. There are resources linked with this position, which enable colleagues to do their very important work. It's also an opportunity to acknowledge legacy and support, and that is very much on our minds today because we celebrate Paul Barron and his family, his father Abram, in whose names this particular position has been endowed. For all those reasons, this is a very important moment in Gabe's career, obviously, but for all of us on the faculty at the university and all of us who are part of this community, the Tulane Law School. And there is the legacy component. I've talked with some of you about this before. This is an inaugural investiture, so this means Gabe is the first of the line, and the line goes on forever. So every subsequent holder of this professorship is going to be able to note with great pride that they hold the position once held by sports law guy. How many followers right now on the Twitter?
38,412.
38,412 followers on the Twitter feed, but who's counting, right? It's very cool. So I'd like to say a word before I invite Paul Barron to come up to the podium and join me. I want to say a word about Paul and Arlene. When I joined the university in the summer of 2007, I had the distinct privilege and honor of succeeding Paul Barron as the university provost. That was not simply an honor, that was a very good thing, because I had the mentorship of a wonderful colleague and leader, and have always had that all the years that I've been privileged to serve in this position. Paul and Arlene took Patty and me under their wing, guided us, advised us, welcomed us. There were occasions when Paul reprimanded me. Those were, you remember, but always in the spirit of, as we all know, his great devotion and love of this institution and its mission, and of the community and of the city of which this institution is such a key part. So I want to say, in addition to celebrating Gabe and celebrating the Abram and Paul Barron professorship in law, I want to celebrate Paul Barron and Arlene Barron, my friends, my mentors, and thank them very much for all they've done. So Paul, with that, may I invite you to join me up here for a moment. It's right there, okay. I'll get this out of your way in a moment. It's, as I say, it's my happy task now to read the formal resolution of the president, the faculty, and the administrators of Tulane University. So there are a bunch of whereases here, so just be patient and, think good thoughts, okay? Whereas the Paul and Abram B. Barron Professorship in Law was established by Paul Barron along with family and friends to advance scholarship and teaching at the Tulane University Law School by supporting an exceptional professor for which the university expresses its deepest gratitude and appreciation. And whereas Paul Barron has demonstrated a tremendous degree of personal dedication and philanthropic support to Tulane University throughout his 34-year career. And whereas Paul Barron has acted with wisdom and integrity as the class of 1937 professor of law at Tulane Law School, as vice dean of the law school, as interim provost and senior vice president for academic affairs, and as chief information officer and vice president for technology services. And whereas Paul Barron has distinguished himself throughout his life and career as a two-time winner of the Felix Frankfurter Distinguished Teaching Award. 2 times? Really? You couldn't
One
reading.
and 3,
okay,
but I wasn't
all right.
able to.
And whereas Gabriel Feldman has had an exceptional record of academic and professional achievement, earning his undergraduate degree, master's degree, and JD from Duke University, and through his career as an attorney, beginning with his work as a judicial clerk to Judge Susan Black, and continuing as an associate with Williams and Connolly. And whereas Gabriel Feldman joined Tulane Law School in 2005, where he serves with distinction as an associate professor of law, as director of the Tulane Sports Law Program, and as the associate provost for NCAA compliance, and where he has received a President's Award for graduate and professional teaching once. And whereas, yeah, you'll get it again, right. And whereas Gabriel Feldman has earned acclaim as an authority on sports law and as a skilled mediator, arbitrator, and consultant, therefore let it be resolved, in recognition of all of the above, that the administrators of the Tulane Educational Fund, the faculty, students, and staff of the Tulane Law School, and the president of Tulane University do hereby express their enduring appreciation to Paul Barron and decree that Gabriel Feldman be invested as the holder of the Paul and Abram B. Barron Professorship in Law.
Thank you.
I leave the podium to you.
Okay. Okay. What's nice as I look around here is I see a lot more students here for Gabe than there are adults. Not that you're not adults. Here for me, and that's appropriate today. I apologize my reading these remarks, as I still have some difficulty speaking in a formal setting, and this is an occasion, I want to get this exactly right. I appreciate the provost and the dean to give me the opportunity to speak briefly, I want to make that clear, briefly, about the professorship, since this is really a time to celebrate Gabe's investiture. The professorship exists only because of the support to my sister and me by our family, particularly my wife, there she is, children, one of whom is here, and grandchildren in particular, who are out here, and my daughter-in-law as well. And I also want to thank our friends and family and colleagues for this support as well. I also want to thank my sister's family, her husband, her children, and her grandson. I also want to thank particularly Yvette Jones for helping to make this all happening. I wish she were here to hear this, because this would not have happened without her support. My sister and I are enormously pleased that the professorship bears the name of our father. I would have preferred that it would name only my father, rather in addition to my name. My sister and I would not be the people we are without the inspiration Abe Barron, which everyone called him. No one called him Abram, other than his mother, gave us. He was a fine and giving man who everyone he met appreciated that. I would also like the opportunity to say a few words about Gabe. It is fitting that he is honored in this way. In addition to all of his accomplishments, which you have heard today, Gabe was exceedingly kind to me. I may cry. I'm not kidding. I may. So I apologize for that in advance. As many of you know, I had a stroke 4 years ago. While it didn't affect me physically, initially I was not able to teach effectively. Nevertheless, I tried to teach my negotiation class. It was quickly evident that I could not do so. At a real sacrifice for himself, Gabe stepped in to complete the course. I will forever be grateful for this. As a result, I congratulate Gabe of his investiture into the first Barron professorship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And thank you for inspiring us, as you always do, with your courage and your wisdom. It's my next task and great honor to be able to formally invest Gabe in this named position. I do want to say one word selfishly about Gabe's role as the Associate Provost for NCAA Compliance. Gabe is part of the Academic Affairs leadership team in that role. He is a wonderful part of our team. He keeps us all on our toes. He reminds us what we can't do, as most lawyers do. But most of all, he has made NCAA compliance a signature quality program here at Tulane, something that our intercollegiate athletics program is known for, celebrated for, and very proud of. And I know I speak for all of us in academic affairs, the entire university community, and indeed for all our colleagues in intercollegiate athletics when I thank you for that, Gabe. And let me please ask you to come join me here up at the podium. A few more words to bestow upon you, and then the words will be yours. So let me formally read what is on this plaque to my right, which will end up in Gabe's hands. Tulane University is proud to appoint Gabriel Feldman to the Paul and Abram B. Barron Professorship in Law. The recipient of this honor is hereby recognized for his outstanding contributions to teaching and research in the field of law. Gabe's distinguished reputation as a nationally renowned expert on sports law further merits his conferment as the holder of the Paul and Abram B. Barron Professorship in Law, which signifies the highest standards of excellence in academic research. Congratulations, Gabe.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you to the provost, thank you to Dean Meyer, thank you to the faculty, current students, former students for being here. Special thanks, obviously, to Paul Barron, Arlene, and his entire family. And I want to give some extra special thanks to my family who is here in attendance, in particular my wife, Abby Gaunt, who some of you know as the Dean of Students, the new Dean of Students, her parents, my in-laws, or the parents of the new Dean of Students, and a really, really special thanks to my parents who were planning on being here but can't be here because my father has some health issues, but they are participating via FaceTime from my father's hospital room. So, hi, Mom and Dad. Sorry I couldn't be here. And lastly, my son, who has decided to skip this part of the investiture but will meet us at the reception. To my students in attendance, that is only appropriate if you are 3 years old, so don't get any ideas. This is a truly special honor for me to be the inaugural holder of the Barron Professorship for a lot of reasons, a lot of which were already discussed. I think most people know Paul's reputation in the community and the impact he's had on the law school, the university, and the community at large. And what makes this particularly special to me is the impact he's had on me at a personal level. And he has been a friend, he's been a mentor. I've learned a tremendous amount from Paul, and I had the rare opportunity to co-teach that negotiation course with Paul. And it's incredible how much I learned from Paul just by watching him work, just by watching how he worked in the classroom, how he worked with the students, how he worked with the adjunct professors who were a key part. I see some of them in the crowd today who were a key part of that class. And to a person, from the second-year law student who was in his class to the federal judge who was serving as an adjunct, they all said the same thing about Paul. And I think most of us feel this way about Paul. We have an admiration for your intelligence, for your work ethic, for your professionalism, but mostly, from my perspective, for your kindness and your generosity. And that, to me, is why it's an honor to be honored with you today, and why it's a real privilege to be the holder of this Barron Professorship. So thank you very much to Paul, to Arlene, and to everybody else. I really would not be here without what you've done, without what you've done for me. Part of what you've done for me is open my eyes to a field of law that I hadn't focused on my first few years, certainly in practice, but my first few years here in the faculty, and that was mediation and negotiation theory, which I started to shift some of my research on. But as most of you know, my primary focus has been on sports law, and in particular, the intersection of antitrust law, labor law, and the sports industry. And it's been a very fun ride for me. Part of the reason I got interested in sports law to begin with is because of my interest in the underlying areas of law, in particular antitrust law and intellectual property and labor law. But I became even more interested when I realized that the application of those laws to the sports industry had a massive impact on what happened in a day-to-day basis in the sports industry, and that the sports industry is what it is today and continues to change because of the application of these areas of law. And so in many ways, I was not only in part in the cutting edge of some of the scholarship piece of it, but also in the practical piece of it. And I quickly realized that people wanted to know the answers to some of these very complicated questions of law. So you think back to 2011, when the NFL players were locked out by the NFL owners, and people everywhere, but particularly in New Orleans, were panicking at the mere thought that 1 week of preseason games might be canceled, and they were hanging on every word about how this lockout might end, how the players might be able to get back on the field. And underlying it all was a very difficult, complex battle between antitrust law and labor law. What happens if a group of owners have locked out a group of employees, in this case NFL players, and those players dissolve their union? and claim that that lockout, which used to be clearly legal under labor law, is that now illegal under antitrust law? And how does that interact? And I was tasked with, or I took on the task of translating what I was doing in terms of scholarship while I was writing law review articles to the masses via Twitter, via social media. And believe me, it's very hard to convey antitrust concepts in 140 characters. Pro-competitive by itself takes up about 32 characters. And that's a very narrow joke for the Twitter antitrust crowd, but I'm glad. But I'd like to think that I was able to raise the level of discourse for the average sports fan rather than bring the level of discourse down to the average sports fan. And I think the best example of this is an interview I did with Bobby Hebert. Some of you may know Bobby Hebert. He's a well-known former quarterback of the Saints, was a very successful college football quarterback, very colorful sports commentator now, has a show on, I forget which radio station, Drive Time show. He's known for a lot of things. He's not a noted legal scholar. And he had me on his show fairly regularly during the lockout to try to get the answer to the question, when will this lockout end? Because all anyone wanted to know is, when will the players get back on the field? When will we have football again? And so I did lots of interviews at that time, and again, lots with Bobby. Bobby gets me on, asks me, the first question, he says, Gabe, I've read a lot of what you've written lately. And I doubt he has a subscription to Wisconsin Law Review, but I don't know. But I'd also been writing in some mainstream periodicals. And he says, Gabe, I've got to know the answer to this question before we really get started. Based on some of the things you've written, answer this for me, bracing for this question. And he says, how is it possible that a court can block the NFL from locking out the players based on the text and legislative history of the Norris-LaGuardia Act? At that moment, I knew I had made the impact I had always intended. I got the Cajun cannon to ask a question about interpretation of federal labor law. So my research in that area has continued, and now my current focus is a bit of an offshoot of that work. And what I'm looking at now, broadly, is how antitrust law should apply to labor markets. And if you think about traditional antitrust analysis is based on a group of sellers getting together. Group of sellers getting together and doing things that restrict competition that somehow harm the product market, which ultimately harm the consumers who are trying to buy those products. And there's a whole century of antitrust law built around that analysis. And what's come out of it is the idea that antitrust law is designed to protect consumers, to protect consumer welfare. But what happens if we look at a restriction on competition, not in the product market that is directly affecting the consumers, but in the labor market? What do I mean by the labor market? What if you have a group of employers who are now buyers, not sellers, and what they're buying is a particular type of input, and that input is the services of their employees? Can they restrict how much those employees are making? If it were the other way around and were sellers restricting what they would charge to buyers, that's clearly illegal. What if it's flipped, though? And what if it's the buyers restricting what the sellers can charge? And again, the sellers being the employees. And the reaction I'm getting based on your body language is, it's not particularly interesting, but I'm glad you think it's interesting. And that's, again, I think my parents, who were smiling the whole time I was talking, think it's very interesting. But when I phrase it differently, I get a much different reaction. So let me phrase it differently and see the reaction I get, at least from my sports law students who have found the deepest recesses of the classroom like I expected them to. Is it legal for the NCAA and colleges to agree not to pay student athletes? That's the question everybody wants to know. The Ninth Circuit actually issued a 73-page opinion today, which I distilled into 280 characters. It was 2 tweets this morning. That's the question everybody wants to know, because that's going to shape the future of college sports. And we can't answer that question unless we know how antitrust law applies to the labor market. And so it's been endlessly fun for me to be able to research these issues, because I get to do it with 2 hats on. One, from the legal academic hat, and 2, from the mainstream sports fan hat. And on top of all of that, what truly brings me, I think, the greatest joy, and I know this brought Paul great joy as well, is the impact that I have, and I know that our entire faculty and our community has on our students. And that's the big part about why I do my job. It's for the students, for the current students, for the former students. And I hope I can make an impact and continue to make an impact on their lives. I will brag a little bit about the success that the sports law program has had recently. There are 3 students from the class of 2015, so just graduated a few months ago, that now have full-time jobs with 3 different professional sports teams. I'm right out of law school, came here with a dream job, and they now have their dream job. And there is actually 1 student in the class of 2016 who just got hired by a professional sports team. So U.S. News and World Report, if you're listening, put that in your rankings. And it's really, again, what gets me going every morning is the opportunity to work with my students and have an impact on my students. And I know that was a big part of Paul's career, and Paul has had such a tremendous impact on me that I am truly blessed and honored to be able to continue doing what I do, but now to do it as the Barron Professor of Law. So thank you very much.
Well, I know you join me in congratulating Gabe on this very well-deserved appointment, and on congratulating and thanking Paul and Arlene and their families for their support of this, making all of this possible, and all of their contributions to our community. I just want to also close by thanking all of you for being here today and joining us in the celebration, and to invite all of you to walk across the hallway to the Miriam Meyer Burkett multipurpose room to join Gabe and Paul and their families in a continuation of the celebration. So thank you very much.